PSA Group, it's agreed to buy Opel and all its operations from General Motors in a deal valuing the business at roughly $2.3 billion. Now, the move creates a new regional car giant to challenge Europe's biggest car maker, the Volkswagen Group. Now, the maker of Peugeot and Citroen cars vowed to return Opel and its British Vauxhall brand to profitability. It's targeting an operating margin of 2% within 3 years and 6% by 2026. And that is going to be underpinned by 1.7 billion euros in joint cost savings. GM shares closed the day 1.2% higher on Friday after the deal had been struck. The transaction, however, does see GM retaining most of Opel's pension liabilities, as are estimated by analysts to be about $10 billion. All right, then, Daniel Rangers joins us once again to talk about the business around this deal. Daniel, GM, of course, has been essentially divesting across quite a few of its operations. We've seen it sell its commercial vehicle operations in East Africa over to Isuzu. We've seen it pull it back from making Holdens in Australia. What's Mary Barra's endgame here? Is it a smaller, US-focused, more electrified GM?
I think Mary Barra's endgame is the best return on invested capital that she can possibly manage to please the shareholders, the owners of the company. And quite frankly, if you've seen 17 years or so of a flailing European operation that's continued to leak money, and in fact, if you look at the headline deal here, you say, okay, they paid over $2 billion. Well, in fact, if you look at the detail, the GM operation is accounting something like over $4 billion in losses as a result of this deal. So, you know, I think they just want to do what's right and effective for them. I think they want to focus on the American operation. I think they want to continue to grow their foothold in the Chinese market and just find things that work a lot better than these European companies that they just simply don't have the culture and know-how to manage. And, you know, there's been a lot of complication with politics around the European car industry. I just don't think they're the right people to handle that.
Indeed. Guy also joins us. Guy Henderson joins us now live from Berlin as well. Guy, you've been following this story for quite a bit of time. Walk us through the context here. Opel has been making losses for years under GM's leadership. I believe the number in question is about $8 billion for the last decade or so. So what's the attraction in this business for PSA?
Well, PSA has made its ambitions pretty clear, and it is that it wants to expand its business and its sales beyond a pretty saturated European market and take it to faster growing economies, including, of course, and perhaps primarily, an Asian and Chinese market. Now, the problem that this French company has faced to date, or part of the problem, has been that buyers in Asia aren't actually that interested in buying French-branded cars. What they are interested in is buying German-branded cars. Now, Opel, of course, is a German brand company, so excuse the pun, but in a way, PSA's hope will be that this will give them the key to a very attractive market. And add to that, of course, that this merger, this takeover creates the second largest car maker in Europe. Just 3 years after PSA was received a state-backed bailout in France, and I think this is being seen as a statement of intent.
Indeed. Let's talk about the cost savings that these companies are talking about. PSA said they expect joint cost savings, Guy, of about $1.8, $1.7 billion by combining the operations. Where are these savings going to come from?
Yeah, I mean, the company is saying that it wants to save about $2 billion a year for the next 3 years or so, by which time it wants to return Opel to profit. It's been making a loss since 1999. And there is this fear across its many factories in Europe that may inevitably mean some job cuts. There's 15,000 German employees of Opel. That's where its headquarters is. There was a protest by concerned employees just a few hours ago outside its headquarters in southwest Germany. Another example, 5,000 jobs in Spain, a country that's also making an economic recovery but still has very high levels of unemployment, and then 4,500 or so employees in the UK as well. And the thought is that there will have to be some job cuts somewhere. And PSA says it will honour the various agreements that it has with workers' unions in these places. That could protect those jobs for a couple of years. But beyond that, I think at all of these plants across Europe, there is a high level of uncertainty.
Indeed. One last question for you, Daniel. After this deal was announced, GM management pointed out it will free up about $2 billion or so in cash for share buybacks. I mean, what's the rationale here? Why take some of its equity off the market instead of just investing it in R&D or product design? Because lower down the line, they do have to sell more cars, different cars, for a completely different vehicle market.
Well, clearly to please the shareholders, but GM is a very large investor in research and development in any way, in the region of about $8 billion a year. That is not anywhere near as high as VW, which spends about $15 billion a year on R&D, but it's certainly up there with the big boys. Toyota's around about $9 billion a year. But I think you're right to point out in the earlier question that GM is looking to target very substantially the battery market in order to sort of look at the electric vehicle capabilities that will happen down the line and everybody's anticipating. So I think GM is going to be one of those key players on the R&D market in developing new technologies. And who knows, there might be some partnership tie-ups with the people that they've sold these companies to down the line. There have been some indications that this has been a fairly amicable deal. So I expect them to continue to be sort of pushing on R&D, even if for the moment they're using some cash with a little bit of, fancy economics to bring back a couple of $1 billion to shareholders.
Indeed. Gentlemen, it would be fun to talk about the competition between the Chevy Volt and the Bolt versus Tesla and how that plays out in the context of the European car market, but we have to leave it there for the time being. Guy Henderson in Berlin, thank you for your time. And of course, Daniel Rengers live in Washington, D.C.